It's asking for just a list of things. Identify the vertices, foci, asymptotes, and eccentricity of each. Then sketch the graph. So this is a multi-part question, so you do need to label your pieces, by the way. Just make sure that when you have them all in there, you label what is what. For the graphing piece of it, really the vertices and the asymptotes are really going to help you graph the most. The foci tell you which direction it's going, so when you plot those foci, it tells you, oh, well, that's going to be going up or down or whatever. But the asymptotes kind of tell you how wide those parabola type graphs are. So we're going to start by getting this into a standard form. You're going to do this by grouping, pretty much. Grouping your x's together, grouping your y's together, and then simplifying it with completing the square. So for this one, it doesn't matter which side you put it on. It's going to work out the same when you end up dividing. But I just grouped my x's and y's on the left-hand side. So for this, I would say negative x squared, and then I would move that 4x over. And then I have plus y squared, and I would move that 4y over, and then move the positive 4 over to the right is how, that's how I would do it. And remember with this, it's not really about which is bigger, which is smaller. It's that one of these groups is going to be negative and one of these groups is going to be positive. And so when you do this, and you have a positive 4 over there, you can see that my x is going to be my negative group and that my y is going to be my positive group. If you flipped it to the other side, you would have actually had a negative 4. And so at first it would look like your y is going to be negative, but at the end you're going to divide by that negative 4 and all those signs are going to change. So no matter which side you put it on, it's going to end up with the correct positive and negative group. All right. A couple of things here. When you complete the square for this x, you're going to pull out a negative 1, which is going to change that to a positive 4, okay? So then I'm going to have x plus 2 squared. Remember, that's going to be plus 4, but I'm going to multiply by the negative, right? So inside this group, if I were to think of it this way, I have x squared plus 4x plus 4 minus 4, right? That's kind of what's going on in that group. So when I multiply that over, I'm actually adding 4 because I have to pull it out of the group with the negative 1. So if I add 4 to the left, then I need to add 4 to the right, okay? This next group is going to be just y minus 2 quantity squared. Remember, in the group, it's y squared minus 4y plus 4 minus 4. And I am subtracting 4 because it's a positive 1 out there. So if I subtract 4 from the left, I need to subtract 4 from the right, okay? Does everybody see why I did that on the other side? It just happened to all be 4s for this one. It's not necessarily going to do that, but that's what happened with this guy. So this, of course, these guys cancel. I end up with just that 4. So my standard form is going to look like this. X plus 2 quantity squared over 4. Y minus 2 quantity squared over 4 equals 1. All right. So here's the thing. If you think about this standard form, your A is always under your positive group and your B is always under your negative group, all right? And so when you start thinking about the other things going on, the first thing I look at is which direction is this guy opening? This guy is going to open according to the positive guy. So my y is positive, which means it's going to open up and down, which means my vertices are going to be moving, my y value of my vertices are going to be moving, and my y value of my foci are going to be moving. Okay, that's what that tells me. So when I'm looking at this, I'm going to say which group is positive, which group is negative. My y group is positive. That means this guy's going to open up and down. Okay, that's what that tells me. Okay. So I don't have to try to remember A's or B's or whatever. What I'd have to try to remember is which one's positive. That's the direction it's going to go, which means that's what my vertices are going to do. My y value of my vertices are going to move. My y value of my foci are going to move for this one, okay? If my x value were positive, it would open left and right, and my x values for my vertices would be moving, and my x values for my foci would be moving. Does that make sense? All right. You'll notice that your asymptotes are really the same. They have A's and B's, but remember for this one, it's y over x for your asymptote. So Again, don't worry about A's and B's here. Worry about which values under my Y and which values under my X to determine how I set up my asymptote, okay? It's always Y over X, always Y over X. That's why that A and B flips places here, because on one way the B is under the Y, on the other way the A is under the Y. So it's just Y over X for my asymptote here, all right? So let's go on and answer the questions then. My vertices are going to start at my center. Remember, I have two vertices with these. My center is in between them. So my center is still at HK, all right? And so my center is something that I don't necessarily ask for here, but it is going to help you determine the rest of it. So my center is going to be at -2, 2, all right? That's where my asymptotes should intersect. All right, so that does help you see if you're graphing things correctly. And then from there, I'm going to move, in this case, up and down from there to determine where my vertices are, okay? And so then I'm going to look at the value that is under my Y, which is, remember, this is the value squared, all right? So I'm going to move the square root of that away. All right, so if that is 4, then that's technically 2 squared. So I'm going to start at that center, and my vertices are going to go, they're going to stay at -2 for the X value. The Y value is going to go up 2, which is 4, and then down 2, which is 0. So I look to the one of how it's opening, and the square root of that number underneath tells me how far away from center I'm moving. Those are my vertices. It does not ask for covertices, so you don't have to worry about that, all right? It does ask for the foci, the 2 focal points, and so that you do have to find your C. Remember, and it's not on the sheet, so you may want to write it just to jog your memory, but when your formula is subtraction between the two, your C is addition, okay? On the other ones where it was addition between the two, your C was the subtraction of it, right? So you're going to take, to find my C, which helps me find my focal points, my C is going to be the square root of this guy, because that's already squared, plus this guy, which is already squared. So it's the square root of 8, or 2 squared of 2, okay? And once again, if it opens up and down, my Y value is going to change for my focal points here, okay? So I'm going to say for my focal points, I'm going to leave my X the same, and I'm going to go back to my center, and I'm going to add and subtract my C value. So it's going to be 2 plus the square root of 2 squared of 2, 2 plus 2 squared of 2. I think they left it that way in your answers. And then my X is going to say the same, 2 minus 2 squared of 2. All right? So I found my vertices. I have found my focal points. I'm going to move this up a little bit so that I can have a little more room. All right. So now I need to find my asymptotes and my eccentricity. All right. So for my 2 asymptotes, I'm going to have 2 because remember this is 2 different groups here. It's always going to be in slope-intercept form, all right? We're going to start off not in slope-intercept form, but then we're going to get it to it. It's going to be Y equals, and then we're going to take our number that's under our Y over our number that's under our X. And remember, that number is squared, all right? So these are both 4, which means it's 2 squared and 2 squared, all right? Always the value under the Y over the value under the X. It's going to be a positive and a negative. So I actually have 2 over 2. That's positive 1. And then it's going to be my X minus my H. Remember, X is always with your X. Your H is always with your X. This happens to be negative 2, so it's going to be X plus 2. And then plus my K value. That's the number with my Y. So this is my number with my X. That's my H. This is my K. Remember, it's opposite of what you think there. That's going to be my first one. I want to put it in slope-intercept form, which means distribute. It's a 1, it doesn't matter. And simplify. This one's going to be Y equals X plus 4. Then I'm going to do the negative piece of it. Y equals the negative 1. It's going to be the same number, just negative. Same exact stuff in here. Distribute negative x plus minus 2 plus 2. So this is going to be y equals negative x. So these two represent my asymptotes there. All right. Remember, your asymptote is positive or negative, the number under your y, number under your x minus h plus k. That is your asymptote, okay? C over A, yeah. So my eccentricity here is going to be C, remember my C was 2 square root of 2 over A. That's actually the value that is under my positive, right? So in this case, they're the same, but it's technically the value under my positive group, which is 2. That simplifies to just square root of 2. Okay, that's my eccentricity. All right, let's look at graphing it. All right, so I'm going to scooch that over. All right, if I graph it, I'm going to graph my center because that's actually going to help me figure out where my two asymptotes should be. So I'm going to graph my center. I'm actually going to graph my asymptotes first because that's going to help me shape those parabolas. And so I'm going to go to these right here and just do slope-intercept. So for the first one, my y-intercept is at 4. And it is a positive 1 slope. So up 1 over 1, and you know for a fact it's going to go through the center. So that's a point you can use. All right. And so I typically dash these because they are not part of my graph itself. So just dash those. It's just a directional line here. And then I'm going to graph the other guy. The other guy's y-intercept is at 0, and it is a negative slope, down 1 over 1. And of course, you know it goes through the center as well. And so you can graph that one. Those are your asymptote lines that you need to graph. All right. And then from there, I am going to graph my vertices. My vertices, remember, are negative 2, 4, negative 2, 0. All right. My focal points, which are graphed, but now that you know this, it's going to show you what the directional is. Those are just going to be a little bit above that. You're adding 2 and then some, I guess. You're adding 2 plus the square root of 2, 2 minus the square root of 2, and so you're going to just be up here somewhere. It's going to be a little bit above 4, actually, I think is where this guy is going to be. And this guy is going to be right here. Once you have that, you're sketching. All right, so when you sketch this guy, you now know about how wide he is because he's going to go out like this. He's going to go to those asymptote lines and turn. Something like that. So what you're looking for is, did I answer all the questions? Vertices, yes, I answered that right here. Focal points, yes, I answered that right here. Asymptotes, yep, I have both of those. You should always have 2 for these. And then eccentricity, yes, I answered that. And then did I graph it? When it says write in rectangular form, what it means is get rid of your t's and write just y's and x's, okay? So for something with a trig function, get them both in t by itself and then rewrite it using your cosine and sine functions, like cosine squared plus sine squared equals 1, or your tangent squared plus 1 equals secant squared. So tangent secant squared minus tangent squared equals 1. You're going to use one of those two when it's trig. When it's not trig, get the easiest one for having the t by itself and substitute into the other guy, okay? So I didn't pull one of those, but we can do one if you want. So you just want to make sure that you are going the path of least resistance when it's one that's not a trig. When it's a trig, it's going to be either sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1 or your tangent and secant, That's what's going to happen with these, all right? So I picked this one, and then we'll try another one in a second. When it's like this, a trig, you're trying to get the trig function by itself. So I'm going to rewrite the first guy to the cosine of t equals x over 4. This guy is going to be sine of t equals y over 5. And then I'm just going to use those two squared plus each other equals 1. So cosine squared, x over 4 squared, plus sine squared, that's y over 5 squared, equals 1. That's always the case. This one's pretty straightforward. It's going to be x squared over 16 plus y squared over 25 equals 1. And you are done. You have gotten rid of your parameters there. All right, so for number 8, while it doesn't look like it, I would actually get that x. I would actually take that x formula to get rid of that root is what I would do here. So what does that look like? Well, how do I get rid of, so I'm going to take this first one, and I am going to get rid of, or solve for t by itself. So how would I do that? What do I get rid of first? Yeah, I'm going to get rid of the radical first. And so I'm going to do this. X squared equals 7t. So that means t equals x squared over 7. And then I'm just going to substitute him into the other formula. So y equals 7. And instead of t, I'm going to write what I just solved for t. So 7 times x squared over 7 over 5. The 7's cancel, so I have y equals x squared over 5. All right? I will say there's a limitation on here. Right here, my t could not be negative. Why is that? It's in the root. So here, t has to be greater than or equal to 0. So it will basically mean that y also has to be greater than or equal to 0, okay? Because obviously, if we're doing perfect roots here, we're not going to have a negative root. So that's where this little limitation comes from. It follows that from the t, from that square root. All right, so here I am actually rewriting each of these in form of t, meaning these are written with t's. I'm going to write my x's and y's with t's. So the last way I had it split up and I was like, hey, get rid of your t's. Now they're giving me some functions and they're saying rewrite each one of them as x equals something and y equals something. So I'm going to take the easiest one here. The easiest is going to be this group right here, and I'm going to rewrite it to solve for y. Because now I want an x and a y function. Given the rectangular function, which is what they're calling that, which is your parabolas and all that rewritten, you're going to split it back up into an x and y, into parametric, okay? So I'm going to take this guy. He's the easiest one. I'm going to multiply, I'm going to add the 1, so I have t plus 1 equals y over 2, and then I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. So y is going to equal 2 times t plus 2, all right? There's one of them already. That is one of my parametric equations, y equals 2t plus 2, all right? I'm going to now use him to plug in over here to get my x in terms of t, all right? So I'm going to rewrite my x, and I'm going to plug in my 2t plus 2 for my y over 5, all right? You're going to have to FOIL that guy. So it is, and remember the negative applies to the foiling. So this is going to be 4t squared. That's a negative 4t squared. 2 times 2 is 4. Double it is 8. So a negative 8t. And then 2 squared, and then distribute that negative over 4. I will say when it's like this, they split each numerator with a denominator. So that's not technically standard form when it looks like this. Standard form is going to be split it up. So your second parametric equation is going to look like this. It's going to be the negative 4t squared over the 5 minus the 8t over the 5 minus the 4 over the 5. That is your second parametric equation. So the first page, you are going from 2 parametric to rewriting it in x and y's. Here, you're going to rewrite these in terms of the t. So first one you were getting rid of the t, second one you are writing them in terms of t, getting rid of the x's and the y's.